Hello, everybody. My name is Gavin Chapman, and I will be your presenter today on the topic of iQuote iPlan, our advanced estimating and planning tool. Prior to diving into the presentation of the tool itself, I've prepared a few slides today that will help you envisage the roadmap of what we'll be working through during our session today. To start with, let's address the business challenge, profitability and scalability. Traditional resources such as estimators, CSRs, project managers, and planners are falling behind as the enterprise or printing, mailing companies experience increasingly faster turnaround times, shorter runs, and quite often more personalization. When you couple that with the imminent retirement of some of these highly skilled and experienced resources and that growing complexity of jobs, businesses tell us that they worry about how to keep those front office engines running. The solution to that, we believe, is speed, flexibility, and accuracy, essentially an increase in efficiency and automation. And for that, it may translate into the ability to drive greater efficiency into the sales team, the estimating resources, and the customer service and job planning resources in your business. We feel it is essential to find tools or deliver tools that improve the quality, the consistency, and also the accuracy of these estimates and jobs that have to move through the organization. Our customers also tell us that they are sometimes struggling to support such a wide variety of equipment that's constantly evolving, their production processes, the technologies being used, and the organization really needs to adapt so you can move quickly and capitalize on new opportunities for different products or different customers. And of course, on an ongoing basis, as those things change continuously, a solution that provides high levels of, let's call it configuration and flexibility and potentially automation to resolve those challenges. So as we focus a little bit on these key concepts of speed, flexibility, and accuracy, let's talk a little bit about speed and how very efficient, relevant, and intuitive tools that you can provide your team can deliver this speed solution. Let's think a little bit about information as it is entered into the system. Imagine maybe a salesperson using a tool to submit an RFQ, a request for quote, to the estimating department. If there is missing information, then clearly we've just hit a speed bump. The estimator now is unable to continue doing the estimate because of that missing information. Anything we can do to catch that ahead of time is obviously going to increase speed. We all know about that edict of eliminating duplicate entry at any time. So if someone has already entered this information, wouldn't it be wonderful if the next person in the process didn't have to re-enter that? As our customers' businesses grow and some of their skilled resources are retiring, they need to bring new employees into the business, and it's essential for them to bring them up to speed fast so they can become effective and efficient in that process. We all know the story of being able to satisfy your customers, and if there is a possibility of reducing the turn time of estimates back to sales and back to the customer, there's potential more opportunity for you to win that work. And of course, quicker estimating also feeds that process. But let's not forget that we're talking about iQuote/iPlan today. iQuote is not just an estimating tool. It's also a job entry, job planning, and to some degree, job management tool. And for that reason, we believe that faster job entry is also a solution to challenges that customers are facing in their business. Wherever possible, we're trying to look at opportunities to use intelligence or in some cases even AI to assist with the process. Better analysis. As I am ready to prepare a quote letter, can I analyze my costs quickly and easily so I can make a good and fast decision about pricing. We all know the situation where as customers' businesses change, sometimes their existing systems can't keep up with the diversity of their business and they end up with multiple systems, sometimes spreadsheets, sometimes different tools. One system essentially can also take speed bumps out of the workflow. In today's session, we'll also talk about automation possibilities or potential. There is nothing as efficient as being able to eliminate steps in the process or even the ability for things to happen without any human intervention. And of course, an interesting aspect of speed is how quickly somebody can navigate through the tool that they used to do their role. And we believe that the dynamic user interface that is available in iQuote and iPlan is going to be very powerful. And we'll see more of this as we head through the presentation today. Let's talk a little bit about flexibility. As businesses change, the tool needs to be able to adapt to that diversity that's happening in their business, either through volume, vertical growth, or diversity, different products, horizontal growth. And on the screen, you will see examples of how many of our customers, the heart of their business started as a traditional offset commercial print shop, sheet fed and web, obviously has morphed over the years into digital print, but those same customers now might be focusing some of their revenue targets on direct mail and transactional mail. We're seeing customers drifting, of course, into signage and displays, folding cartons, envelopes, labels, kitting, and the question marks down the bottom are, who knows what will happen tomorrow, next month, next year? So flexibility is critical that the workflow can be supported by the tool that is flexible enough to flex as the workflow or as the product mix changes. We'll see a lot of that in the presentation today. Lastly, I'd like to talk a little bit about accuracy. As you think about the speed and the flexibility solution, let's also think about the accuracy of that information. It's great that we can race through things at a good speed and that we have the flexibility to adapt, but we also want to make sure that there's consistency and dependability in that workflow. I'd like to talk briefly about the concept of employee fatigue. If your employees are fighting the tool and fighting the system and having workarounds, it brings fatigue and stress and a little bit of chaos into the workflow. And that, of course, quite often causes errors in and of itself. We all know about those estimates that accidentally went out the door where we forgot to include the cost of some important element or process. Wouldn't it be wonderful if a system could use user-defined rules to try and look for errors or detect limitations on equipment based on maybe caliper or ink coverage or some other criteria to prevent these errors from taking place? Wouldn't it be wonderful if a solution could simulate all of the different ways that you might be able to produce a product? Should we go offset? Should we go digital? Is sheet fed the best method? Should we go roll fed? Can we do inline operations? We'll talk a lot about this as we work into a couple of examples today. Things that humans just cannot do given the time constraints of getting an estimate out the door. Intelligent systems can do massive numbers of calculations to assist that person in educated and knowledgeable decisions. The ability to very, very quickly and easily analyze all of those costs and come back with suggestions. We've all heard the story about handing the same estimate request to different estimators and seeing different results, even though the specs are the same. We also hear a lot of stories from customers about how often someone has to override a system because of waste or number of sheets needed, or the run speeds have to be cranked because of domain knowledge that lives inside our most expert people. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could share that knowledge with less skilled people in the organization? We've all heard the story of requests for quotes coming from a sales team, and the customer wants 3 different options for ink colors and quantities and paper stocks. It's a reality of life that that's not going to change, and the system should provide an easy way to satisfy those needs from your customers. Unlimited quantities. Let's not limit ourselves to 5 or 6 quantities, because that's not a limitation that the customer is interested in. We spoke a little bit about expert knowledge. And then, of course, the interesting concept of accuracy is also trying to once again eliminate duplicate entry. And there's 2 issues in play here. There's the speed. Let's not enter stuff twice because it makes us more efficient. But as we think about accuracy, rekeying or duplicate entry also has a negative effect of impacting accuracy, those mistakes that are made. So just a few slides to help you understand the roadmap or some of the topics we'll be working through today. Let's now actually dive right into iQuote and iPlan and take a look at how some of these things that we've spoken about in the slide deck happen in real life. Please, I wanted to invite you to ask questions using the chat. Sophie, our moderator today, will be looking at those chats, and we'll pause periodically during the presentation to see if we can answer any of those questions. So with that said, let's dive directly into iQuote. I sometimes call this a day in the life of using iQuote. And I'm going to start the process today by simply entering information for a product that I need an estimate on. Now, as you think and watch me through this process, imagine who this might be in your organization. We spoke about trying to eliminate duplicate entry. What if the person using this screen was actually a salesperson on their iPad, just quickly keying the specs in to pass to the estimator? So let's walk through that process now. I'm going to dive in here and I want to create a new estimate. And the first thing that I see is an area where I can look up the customer that I'm doing the estimate for. This is what we call the product carousel. Obviously, these icons would be completely user-defined depending on the kind of work that you do. Folding cartons, labels, mailings, envelopes, booklets. So I simply spin the carousel around and pick the kind of product that I need to get an estimate on. And in this particular case, we'll take a look at a booklet that we need to produce. I'm going to, of course, enter the size. I'm going to enter my quantities that I need for this particular project. You'll notice that each time I enter a quantity, a new field opens up on the right side of the screen. Unlimited quantities. Imagine that customer that wants a pricing for this product for everything from 1,000 to 100,000 in 10,000 increments. So as I click on the confirm button, you will see a new screen appear. This is a fascinating aspect of iQuote. The screens have been completely customized based on the product that I selected from that little carousel. Don't overwhelm the user with so many fields that they mostly have to tab through because they're irrelevant to that product. Think of this as a user configurable request for quote form. Ah, I see we have a cover. Tell me a little bit about that cover. What stock would you like to do the cover on? What's the basis weight? How many colors do you want on that cover? Let's talk a little bit about the text. That's going to be 40 pages. We're going to do that on this kind of stock. Maybe we're going to use this basis weight. And once again, tell me about the ink colors. At this point, I'm going to click the Save button. And what iQuote just did is a validation that you have filled in all of the mandatory fields. Somebody should now be able to provide an estimate to you. Perfect. I've done my job as the salesperson or the CSR or whoever is entering these specs. I'm now going to move that to the next person, and I'm going to change the status of this to submit an RFQ to the estimating team. And I make a little note there, and my job is done. I now close my screen and head about doing whatever I need to do in the business. Meanwhile, several buildings away, several offices away in another state, the estimating team is sitting in their desktop and they see, oh, we've got a new request for quote has come in. I'm going to grab that and I'm going to, I see they need that as soon as possible. Let me go ahead and make an estimate for you. Maybe I put in a brief comment, and as I click the confirm, you could trigger an email automatically to the salesperson, letting them know that someone's already started work on that estimate. So I look at the specs, everything appears to be filled in. I just saved the time of rekeying all of that information. So I've increased the speed in terms of the flexibility. That dynamic user interface was able to easily capture the information from the person that entered it with unlimited quantities. What I'm about to do now is press the calculate button. And as I press the calculate button, this is the power of iQuote. This is the intelligence. This is the speed, the accuracy, and the flexibility. It is racing through the standards that you've set up. And in a few seconds, has done potentially tens, hundreds, maybe thousands of estimates based on these specs, trying to suggest the best way of producing this product. And as I come to the pricing screen, it's intelligently gone behind the scenes, looked up this customer, looked at the markup strategy for this client, applied markups, and is suggesting a sell price. So what has happened in the background? Let's just take specific note of a little message that I see over on the right side that shows that last communication I had with the salesperson. So they now know that I'm working on this estimate. Let's see what iQuote came up with. As I open what we call the engineering screen, I literally see a visual presentation of how iQuote proposed to do the 1,000 quantity digital production. Sounds logical to me. I don't think there's anything I need to do beyond taking a quick look at maybe the second quantity. And I notice on my screen that there's some letters, A, B, C, next to each of those quantities. That's a visual clue that the 10,000 quantity, iQuote has suggested you do that in a completely different way. So let's take a look at that. In this particular case, moving the text section away from the digital press, finding that magic breakpoint in production where you'll be more competitive doing it in another way, in this case on a sheet-fed press, a web press. If we looked at maybe our 100,000 quantity, it's now found another multi-role web press with different pagination that represents the perfect way of producing that quantity. Now, it's important to understand that as an estimator, I may need to make some manual decisions. I know that that equipment is going to be very busy, and I think it might make more sense for me to do this on my sheet-fed press. That's okay. We don't want to limit someone or or prevent them from doing their work in an efficient and flexible and speedy way. So I'm going to simply come in and say, I'd like to look at doing that another way. I'd still like to produce it as two 16s and an 8, or I could change my mind. But let's try putting that on the sheet-fed press. And what you will notice is iQuote is immediately giving me some analysis without any effort on my behalf. This is going to cost you 22.85% more to do it that way. Now, if you believe that's something you need to do, go ahead, and it completely redoes the engineering. At this particular point, I might be quite comfortable with my results. What I might want to do is do just a little bit more analysis and see if there's any other insights on this estimate that might help me be as competitive as possible. So let's scroll down and take a look at where the majority of costs are coming in on this job. Paper is one of my largest costs, and therefore if I can buy that better or cheaper or in a different way, that's going to have a big influence on my competitiveness with this estimate. I can see that my sheet fed and my prepress is also contributing to that. So at this point, what I may choose to do is call the vendor. Now I'm looking at a report here. This is not just a report. I can interact with this screen, call the vendor and see I need a price on 27,000 pounds or sheets or whatever the unit of measure, and I was able to get a better price. You will notice that as I make that change, the typeface dynamically changes to a blue italic font, letting me know and anyone else that opened this estimate that somebody made a change. I scroll down and maybe I'm comfortable here, but I think there's an opportunity. Maybe I could crank the speed of the saddle stitcher just a little bit. This is something that I really think is a great opportunity for me to win. And at this particular point, as we come back to our quantity pricing screen, there is the suggested sell price going to the salesperson. So at this point, let's flick that over to them. At this particular point, I might want to generate a quote letter to go to the salesperson. Let's go ahead and preview that on screen now. Clearly, quote letter formats are very, very personal to people. You would use a report writing tool that is used as part of the technology within iQuote to customize that to the look and feel that's most suitable for you. And please remember, when you do generate these quote letters, you can pick from multiple options with different layouts. So at this particular point, what we may now do is go ahead and confirm that this can now go to the salesperson, and I'm going to allow a proposal to be generated, and that now triggers an email to the salesperson that their quote is ready, and they would then click on that link in the email. That would take them directly into iQuote, and they might want to play around with pricing a little bit or deliver the quote letter themselves. So I want to pause just for a moment and talk a little bit about what we saw happening behind the scenes, or what was happening behind the scenes when I pressed the calculate button. There's something quite fascinating about what was actually taking place behind the scenes. And what I'd like to do is pull up a little spreadsheet here to help you understand the power of what iQuote was actually doing. What you're seeing here on a screen is a sort of a scenario. If we think about the job that I just did an estimate for, it was for a book. We had a cover and we had a text section. Ours was 40 pages, but it could be any page count. If you think about the choices that could be made by an estimator as to how best to produce that job, the cover, typically just a 4-page, so really just one choice there. But there could be 6 choices of press. Do I go digital cut sheet, roll fed, 29-inch, 40-inch, narrow web, full web? All of these different paper choices. Imposition could technically be sheetwise work and turn or perfect. 1 up, 2 up, 3 up, 4 up. Alone, there are 432 different permutations of how I could do the cover alone. 511 permutations based on imposition, press, sheet size, printing method. Multiply that by 4 quantities, 3 or 4 quantities. iQuote technically just did about 3,772 estimates, interrogating every possible way of producing that job, probably cranked in about 20 seconds. There is no estimator in the world that can do 189 estimates per second. So the take home is you wouldn't do this today because there's no bandwidth to do it. But if the system is doing that automatically, what an amazing tool. And how might that influence your go-to-market competitiveness by finding interesting ways to do work? So a quick recap here. We've looked at the request for quote process, or the ability for someone to key in specs, to catch missing information to avoid delays, a dynamic user interface that literally customized itself to make the entry as quick, efficient, easy, logical, and intuitive as possible, unlimited quantities, complete consistency in the information going to the estimating team. We looked at the entry process of the estimate, and we didn't have to enter the information again or make mistakes rekeying it. We used a status to electronically route this from one person to another, once again taking speed bumps off the road and eliminating delays. We looked at the estimating process where we calculated the estimate with thousands of simulations, showed how users can even override or select a different method based on knowledge that they have. The smart cost analysis that was done, the expert knowledge that started to look at the different ways of producing the job. And please remember that those smart rules are looking at limitations on equipment that some less skilled people don't know about. We know that press doesn't like printing stock that's over 100 pound or over 10 point. We know that this particular piece of binding equipment isn't very well suited to book blocks that are over a certain thickness, that a die cutting piece of equipment has a built-in stripper versus manual stripping. These are all of the amazing rules that you can teach iQuote. So now as your business grows and some of the smartest people in your organization are moving to retirement, that you will be able to find resources where the system can help with the lack of skills that they have. We spoke about the analysis of an estimate, the negotiation report where I can start looking at key actionable insights. Where are my biggest costs? How might I be able to influence those? We know that a lot of people, some people made changes. The history, every single person that's touched this estimate, there is a log of every field they filled in the screen. Who pressed that button? Who made that change? They overrode it from this press to another press. What was the cost of that change? Apparently, we called the paper company and got a better price on the paper and felt that the saddle stitcher could run a little bit faster because of some knowledge we have with that customer. So as we think about analysis, these quick, simple, easy, flexible changes that we can make and audit trails. So what I'd like to do is just pause here briefly. I think there might be one question that's come up in the chat. Sophie, do we have a question there?
No, no questions at the minute.
Okay, very good. So let's now talk a little bit more about the flexibility of iQuote. Let's show, obviously, a very simple saddle stitch book. Everyone has seen that kind of work, but let's push things a little bit here. Let's now imagine that I now need to do an estimate for a different kind of product. Once again, we'll come in, create a new estimate. Once again, this could be the estimator keying this information. It could be a salesperson. It could be a customer service person. We're now going to work on a mailing project, and we'll call this the EPS mailing. And once again, I've got some quantities that I need to deal with on this particular estimate. As I click on the confirm button, you will once again see the user interface beautifully rechanging itself to just ask the necessary questions and sometimes pre-filling information in so someone doesn't have to key everything. We just removed another speed bump. We just help with accuracy through accidentally missing information. So here's our number 10 envelope. It's a 24 pound. Yep, this is going to be 2 colors. That looks good. We have a letter, 70 pound. Oh, let's just confirm the ink colors here. This is going to be 4/4. The variable data is only one color. This is important information because it has a big bearing on the best way of producing this job. Now let's also assume that this job's a little bit more complicated. We need a couple of different versions of this letter, very common on mailing and variable data projects. So now we've got a couple of versions of the letter and therefore a couple of versions of the mailing. Are there any supplied components? Sometimes it's quicker to delete than add. Nope, we don't need that, so I'm going to take that component out. And is there anything that you want to tell me about the data processing or the content? Yeah, we need 2 different letter text versions. Once again, the system is leading the person intelligently through the screens. If this was a new person starting in your organization, the system is actually teaching them the questions that they need to answer instead of some lame PDF request for quote form with a million checkboxes and 700 fields on it that's completely overwhelming. Employee fatigue sets in, and what's the result of that? People stop using it because it's just too complicated for them to use. So they go back to sending emails or phone calls. So once again, that's the person submitting the specs. Let's press the calculate button. And once again, iQuote's off there doing its magic, racing through the system, looking at whether we should pre-print the letter and then do the variable data. Should we do it in line? What kind of inserting equipment we have? It's already made those decisions. Once again, several thousand estimates were just done behind the scenes, climbed into the customer's profile to apply markup strategies to this product, and then, of course, showing me the engineering. So in this particular case, the little short run quantity, let's do the envelope on a digital press. Let's buy the envelope and just imprint. We'll do the letter on my digital press. If once again we look at a different quantity, let's look at our 20,000 quantity. Once again, found that magic point where it makes now more sense to still buy the envelope but do it on a jet press. Maybe the digital press. Once again, please remember at any time, somebody may come in and say, nope, I want to do it the other way. Look at all of those choices that iQuote made. This is every possible permutation of production that it tried. And I know I'm scrolling very quickly here, but that is a good representation of those thousands of choices. Oh, I'm going to, 22.46% more costly, but maybe this customer, I know that their logo is very important, so I should run that as a special instead of CMYK or something along those lines. And then, of course, as we look at our 200,000 quantity, a completely different manufacturing method. Now's the perfect time to go to flexo envelope production. We're going to run this on a big, large format web press with inline inkjet heads. Maybe that's the best way of producing that particular one. And then once again, when I'm ready to generate a quote letter, I might pick a slightly different quote letter format that gives the level of detail that that customer might need on their proposal. And for that matter, maybe their invoice, because this pricing detail can be passed all the way down through the billing process. Once again, let's switch gears here a little bit and look at a couple of other very, very diverse kinds of products. As your business diversifies, as we spoke a little bit further, we've taken a traditional commercial print or digital print solution. Now we've introduced the complexity of allowing your business to rapidly adapt to direct mail, transactional mail. Maybe there's also an opportunity for you to think about diversifying your business into other areas. Let's say we also might think about doing some folding cartons. So once again, I'm going to come back to the screen here where I pick my customer. I zoom around and find the product that I want to produce. Please remember all of that stuff is user defined. And this is going to be a folding carton that we're producing here. And let's say that the length of that carton is going to be 5, the sides are going to be 2, and the height is 7 inches. So 3 dimensions now appearing on the screen. And the customer needs 20,000 of those. Again, the user interface totally changing and simplifying the entry of the information. What shape is that folding carton? Is it a hot melt pattern? Do I want to bring in a CAD file that the customer's provided? Do I want to dive in and move the flap over to position 3? And maybe I want the glue flap on the right side and it needs to be 1 inch instead of the system dynamically making everything logical. And let's go ahead and once again pick the stock that we want on this particular product, maybe the ink colors that are needed, and in this particular case, it may make sense to do some kind of varnish on this. Once again, clicking on the Save button, pressing the Calculate, iQuote, off to the races, trying to figure all of the different possible ways that it could be producing that product. It's finished its results, shows me the price, and then once again, as I drill down into the engineering, you can see that it's proposed that we nest that two up on this 23 by 35 inch sheet. We're going to put it through a sheet fed press, the die cutter, manual waste stripping, and into the folder gluer. Now, interestingly enough, we've spoken a lot about flexibility in what if scenarios. What if I wanted to look up a die file? What if I wanted to look at all of the decisions that iQuote made as it thought about how it might step this item up on a sheet? Here's an insight into all of the choices that it made. It tried two up, it tried three up with different grain direction. What if I can only buy a 35 by 23 inch sheet? Four up is the best way for you to go in that particular case. And if that's the method I want, I simply click on confirm. That method is now locked in. And once again, as I calculate, I'm immediately seeing all of the engineering processes that have to take place. What I'd like to do as an example today is also pull up a job that or an estimate that I've already put into the system, but just to give you a quick sense of some other capabilities of iQuote. What if I'm trying to find something, because I think I might even copy an estimate. So let's open a list of estimates, and I immediately see a list of all of the recent estimates that have been done with their status. These little colored flags represent the status of the estimate, and of course this language is all completely user defined. What if I wanted to find something? I want to find that complex mailing kit that I did for this customer or this salesperson in this status, racing through. Ah, there it is, that marketing package that I worked on. Ooh, things are getting a little complicated, but also simple at the same time. A picture's worth 1,000 words. I can see that this marketing kit actually consisted of a number 10 envelope, and there's the envelope, a letter that was folded in this way. We did some data processing to produce those membership letters, the letter inserted into the envelope. We then did a catalog mailing where we printed a catalog. It was a 32-page catalog with a renewal form that's stitched in and folded. And then we had some of those going into the mailing and some bulk catalogs shipped to the customer. We then provide them a point of sale banner, and once again, the screens change to reflect the kinds of things that you might want on a banner, like grommets and aluminum tubes, and then a little folding carton three-dimensional display for their sales presence. So the take-home point here is this incredible ability for the user interface to change, to simplify stuff that's complicated without overwhelming people. A couple of other examples that I'd like to talk about very, very quickly here, and we're just moving at a quick pace, but it will help you understand the value proposition of iQuote, how it translates into things that you might need to do on a daily basis. We've all thought, and at one point, about price lists and how easy they are in your mind to quickly price stuff. What if, as a salesperson or a customer service person, I had the opportunity of pricing from a price list off what we call repeat products? Hey, the customer just called. Do we really need an estimator to do this if there's a price list? And in this particular case, we just want some standard number 10 envelopes. I'm just picking an example of something here. I'm going to dive into my product catalog. I'm going to find the product that I need a price on, and I'm going to give it the quantity. It's pulled the price in. They're priced at 6 cents each. I click on the confirm button. I've got a price for the customer. And what it's telling me is, based on today's costs, I perceive a problem with your price list. What did I just do? I priced that envelope, but I actually calculated the manufacturing cost, the latest paper price, the latest hourly rates, the run speeds, and it's telling me I'm now at this quantity break at a sell price of 55 per thousand. You are losing 33.7% margin. You're giving those away. Wouldn't it be a proactive thing to start revisiting your price lists? And the last thing that we're going to look at briefly before we maybe take one of these estimates and turn it into a job to start helping you understand some of the I plan, the job planning, job entry, and job management features of iQuote. Because iQuote, as I said before, is not just about estimating. It's a common tool that takes you through the workflow. Requests for quote, estimating, approvals, quote letters, turning it into a job, special instructions, milestone events that have to be tracked, pushing directly through into the organization. So one other very, very interesting scenario for many of our customers is the concept of how can we, once again, take speed bumps out of the process, eliminate manual steps, and an opportunity for us to automate wherever possible. This next scenario I'm going to talk about is maybe a customer that wants you to provide estimates on a lot of different products, 10, 20, 30, 50, 100, 200 products, maybe for a marketing campaign, a retail store signage project. Let's take a look at that process where the customer may have actually given you a spreadsheet that has their specs in it. So here's a customer that needs all of this signage produced, and they've told you the size, the ink colors, the paper stock, everything. They've even put notes in there. What if I could import that and not have to rekey that and accidentally make mistakes? So let's go ahead and do an example of that now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to create a request for quote, but I'm going to do that in a slightly different way. So once again, we're going to find the customer. I'm going to call this the store signage project, something like that. And this is for this kind of product that I'm selecting. And what I'm going to do is confirm and now find that spreadsheet. Obviously, these spreadsheets have different columns in them, so I've been able to set up the sort of the concept of a template so it understands what fields to pull in from the spreadsheet. We're now going to import that spreadsheet and click confirm. iQuote literally read the spreadsheet, found all of the products. The green light tells me I understand what's in the spreadsheet. It all makes sense to me. There's no red lights, there's no orange lights. Create an estimate. And it is confirming that that estimate is now being created. Awesome. Let's go out now and find that estimate that was just done. And there it is, store signage estimate. When I open it up, every single thing from that spreadsheet has already come in. Here's every product, the specifications that came from the customer. Let's go ahead now and calculate the estimate. Same procedure we're talking about before. Hundreds, thousands of estimates being done to find the best way of producing all of those products from that spreadsheet. And when that calculation engine's finished, once again, you will see individual pricing for each one of the products. I can dive into the engineering screen and actually zoom in and see all the details of how it chose to impose and produce and print every single one of those digital presses, wide format devices, the best way of doing it. Let's also talk about the opportunity for ganging. Maybe sometimes it makes sense to see, instead of producing these things all individually, is there an opportunity for me to gang? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive in here and create a new option purely for internal reasons, not because the customer wanted multiple options, but here is the option that I had for individual production. I'm going to do a little what if scenario and see if I can get any improvements by ganging. So to do that, we're actually going to grab that option that I just created, that ganging option, and we're going to go out to a little feature that is available as an add-on module within iQuote. We call it layout optimization. And what I might choose to do here is say, you know, this C1S label stuff or this B flute stuff, iQuote's already grouped everything by substrate. And I know that I've got some of this C1S label in stock, and maybe I want to use my 28 by 40 inch sheet side, which I carry. See if there's an opportunity to gang any of these things that are all on the same stock together. And literally what's happening now is iQuote is reaching out to a layout optimization engine to look at laying those up on a sheet in some interesting way. And it's come up with a lovely concept. This is how you could lay those up. And I look at them, maybe I think about grain direction or something, but at this point I might say, I like that layout. All of that magic has now happened. And you will notice that it's created some groups. We call them associations, but it's now ganged multiple components up on a sheet and lets me see that exact layout on the screen. And at this particular point, I'm going to recalculate based on that ganging, saying I like that option. And what I might choose to do now is say, this is ready to go to the salesperson. I've confirmed my pricing. We're going to allow a proposal to take place. And one of the things that I might choose to do now, once again, speed, no more speed bumps, no more rekeying of information, no more accuracy problems, huge flexibility. How about we take all of that pricing and we export that directly back into the customer's spreadsheet so I can now simply return it to them without rekeying everything. And now when I look at the attachments on this estimate, I can see the spreadsheet that was dynamically created that now shows, oops, let me do that again.
Hey, we've got a couple of questions.
Perfect.
So someone has asked, is this integrated with Monarch such that if a planner plans a job differently than it was estimated, those deviations can also be tracked? Because it's great that you can fine tune an estimate, but you have to schedule this to be printed and changes can be made later that completely increase the cost.
Absolutely. So let's take a look at that in real life. I'm coming back to that estimate that we produced. And let's assume now that the customer wants to maybe go ahead with that 2000 quantity. I am now the customer service person. I've picked up that estimate. I'm turning it into a job. What's the customer's PO number? What's the quantity they want to go ahead with? What's the delivery date they're looking at for this particular project? I click on confirm, and what just happened is that estimate is turned into a job. It went behind the scenes, and if I now open my planning screen, that job is already there. Job 251723. It turned the estimate into a job that can be scheduled. I could open print flow scheduling and look at that job, or I may come in and find that the scheduler just told me we can't do that job on the digital press because it's booked for the next 3 weeks. Will you please do that on SheetFed instead? Do I have to send it back to the estimator? No. How about I just come in as a customer service person, select a different route, and once again, iQuote will now open up all of those choices that were available so I can quickly move that to the piece of equipment I want. They said I now need to do that on the 6 color, 43.67% price difference. Maybe that involves a conversation now that we're losing our shirt on that. Is there a better job that might move to that equipment? But if that's the case, the engineering's already done. And at this point, I'm going to release it into production. I've done what I need to do. That just moved all of the information down to Monarch to do inventory reservations, purchase order requisitions, start comparing estimate versus planned versus actual. And instead of entering just free-form notes, Smart Notes is a way for iPlan to intelligently look at the job and set up a questionnaire for the customer service person to answer. Consistency, accuracy, speed. Once again, please confirm the answer to that question. Great, you've answered that question. I have some questions for you about the NCOA for the mailing. You need to answer those two questions that are highlighted in red on the screen. Tell us a little bit about the personalization. What font, what point size are we using? I may even come down and as I answer these questions, the other thing that's taking place is it's pointing out missing information. Ooh, I forgot to answer that question. Let me go and answer that now. Oh, all green lights, excellent. I can also come in and just say, listen, I want to do a quick quality check on the mailing of this. What is the thickness of this piece, what is the piece weight. The system has already confirmed that this is now can be mailed as a letter, not a flat or a postcard. I need to know what class the mailing is. Maybe I also need to know what kind of rate are you looking for? Are we looking for automated rate? Are we using the customer's permit or our permit? What is that permit and what's its expiry date? Is there a CRID that you want to use? Once again, as I answer my questions, all the green lights start changing. And at this point, I may say, all looking good. I've answered all of my special questions to fill out the work ticket. One last thing that I might want to do is set up some milestones to remind me to track certain things on this job. These are all user-defined, what we call events, but essentially it allows a customer service person to say, yep, I got the PO for that yesterday. We're not going to get data on this job until the 7th, next Wednesday. See how it's starting to plug other dates? Based on proofs ideally going out on the 12th, let's assume we won't get proofs back from the customer till the 15th, the mail date is the 30th, and the in-home date is the 4th. What has essentially happened now is a schedule has been built, which will now remind the CSR via email or a to-do list, things that are starting to get out of sync. So I know I answered that question with a lot of screens, but in summary, yes, iQuote directly into Monarch, so all of the downstream workflows work as expected. Change orders, overrides, all done in the beautiful new iQuote iPlan user interface. Sophie, other questions that may have popped into the chat there?
Yeah, so we have quite a few questions. One of them is this? Oh no, sorry, that's the one we've just answered. Someone's asked, do we have to use print flow scheduling?
You do not need to use print flow scheduling. That's totally up to you if you want to push this information down into print flow.
Um, Someone else has asked, does iQuote integrate with Pace?
iQuote is not integrated to PACE today. We're primarily focused on our enterprise suite, our Monarch suite. Now, with that said, I will mention iQuote is also available as a standalone product. So that sometimes is a need for customers that are just looking for a estimating and job planning tool.
Thank you. Someone said, does it integrate into D365?
So not a necessary part of iQuote. There has been a lot of work on what we call our Monarch modernization project, and we have done an integration between Monarch and Business Central 365.
Um, Someone else has asked, does it have the ability of a work back schedule?
A new feature that is coming into Printflow will support that concept of essentially backward scheduling. That is more a feature of Printflow than it is of iQuote. But I want to mention something important. iQuote now supports the ability for you to send an estimate to print flow as a tentative schedule to see if you've got capacity to win that work. Unlike Monarch, where you have to create a job to send something to print flow, iQuote can push that information directly to print flow without a job number, if that is appropriate.
Someone said, "Thank you for your answer. Are those deviations and adjustments in the planned jobs put on the schedule from the estimate tracked for you so that you can see what changed the production
Yeah,
cost?"
yes, so what will happen is as changes are made, that information is passed back down to PrintFlow, and the scheduler will see that in the to-do list and can see what impact those changes have on the schedule. There is also the ability, if an estimate is changed, that it drops into a queue for the customer service person to review those changes that were made and accept them into the job.
Someone said, "Does this replace the job ticket out in productions?"
You will ideally be using the job ticket out of iQuote because it has more capabilities in it. Obviously, work ticket formats are very, very personal, so a lot of our customers will tweak these formats. But in general, we highly encourage customers to now think about the sometimes more beautiful, more flexible, more interesting work tickets. It doesn't matter what you're using out on the floor, whether it's Monarch Shop Floor or AutoCount. We have coded both of those so that iQuote work tickets can be pulled up in that same user interface. But in general, iQuote work tickets are the preferred path forward.
Someone said, "Is the iQuote integrated into Printsmith?"
It is not. We are probably, because of the size and scale and simplicity of some of those operations that are using Printsmith, we feel that iQuote might be a bit of overkill for those kinds of organizations, at least at this early stage. Time will tell on that.
Someone said, "Can we attach customer spec sheets, not an Excel grid, such as a PDF or a Word doc?"
Absolutely. So unlimited file attachments, and a very important thing to note about file attachments within iQuote and within what we call Smart Notes is it does not create another version of the document in the SQL database and blow out your database. It is simply a file path. So now you don't have two versions of the document, you don't have increased file space, and you can enforce all of your security rules about who can access that document. So nice progress and great thinking as we introduce that feature.
Someone asked, "If you make a change in the planning mode, does it recalculate the estimate?"
Great question. In general, if something needs to change on the job due to internal production or scheduling reasons, you make that planning change directly in the job and it does not impact the estimate. If it is typically something where the specs have changed, you make that change in the estimate and push it in to update the job. So you've got a path that's sometimes different depending on the changes that take place.
Someone said, "I understand that the CSRs can see what changed between an estimate and production, but would a finance employee be able to see changes made which had the bigger impact on extra cost?"
You can, and it generally gets down to security rights. There is licensing in iQuote that allows certain people to view only and see those changes that have taken place.
Someone asked, "Does the job ticket allow for operators to add notes about the productions?"
Yes, so those smart notes allow you to sprinkle notes anywhere into the work ticket, and you can determine where those notes appear as the work ticket is printed.
Someone asked about the implementation time for iQuote.
Probably a deeper discussion than we have time for today. It is so varied depending on the nature of the customer, whether they're adding iQuote to Monarch or it's a new install. Probably better to work with your salesperson and start getting some more detailed information from them.
Someone asked, "Can we see an example of a job ticket?"
Yes, so I pulled up a quick example of a job ticket. There are a lot of different formats of the work ticket. We ship standard formats with iQuote, iPlan. Obviously, if you wish to change those, you would be using Microsoft SQL reporting services instead of Crystal for those. And please note, these work tickets are very personalizable, but they can also include hot links. So this is a work ticket where I can punch into just the data processing section of the work ticket. Very, very helpful when work tickets get complicated and multi-page, and then you can summarize for certain people, including the smart notes broken down by the audience.
Thank you. Someone has asked, what does iQuote cost?
Once again, encourage you to work with your salesperson. It, uh, it obviously depends on how many sites, how many users. So great opportunity to work with your sales partner from EPS on those questions.
Someone else has asked, can the salesperson edit the customer quote letter?
It's based on security. Each of our customers seem to have different philosophies on that, but the answer to the question is yes, but it is based on security.
And someone else has asked, will we be sharing the recording of the webinar? Which, yes, we'll be sharing the recording after the webinar.
Excellent. Fantastic set of questions. I thank you for your participation in our webinar today. Hope you found the time spent was useful, informative, and an educating process for you. Once again, my name is Gavin Chapman. I hope you enjoyed the presentation today.